Hello and welcome to my continuing series on world government UFO disclosure. I am Keith, and today's installment comes to you courtesy of the fine nation of the United Kingdom, aka England, Ireland, and Scotland. Let's dive into the material here. UK, as there are a few countries here, has a very, very long, rich, extensive history on all dimensions. Unfortunately, we have a time constraint here of only about 25 minutes or so I want to get right into the material right now. There's a lot, and what I'm going to do is to highlight some of the more significant case histories, main contributors, and disclosure efforts. There is a lot more material in the UK archives for you to delve into, and I will give you some of the websites, significant ones, with which to do your continued investigations as you may want to. So let's jump into it. Few fun facts about the UK. Population currently is about 69 million. That represents less than 1% of the world's population. Now, many, as you'll come to find out in my discussion, many early records of UFO case studies, history, whatever, were destroyed admittedly by the Ministry of Defense in the 1960s and 70s, and the reason for this activity, destruction, was that at those times they felt that there wasn't enough public interest in the UFO UAP phenomenon, so they decided not to have those records cluttering up their various agencies anymore. So the UK has again had a very long, rich history. They have been transparent eventually, not forthwith coming right away, at least, anyways. And they do have a fairly extensive web flow of information processed from the government, and many large communities of ufologists, researchers, investigators have been involved in this activity. So let's get into the history, and again, I'm just going to highlight some of a few of the very more popular cases. There's a lot more material inventory for you to explore on your own. So some of the popular hotspots in England, going back way in history, as you can maybe guesstimate, the Liverpool area has a very rich history. Wiltshire, including the Stonehenge regions, have had a long folklore history which continues today and into the future. In the 1100s and 1200s, there were many reports by citizens and officials alike of glowing, flat-domed, silvery bright objects stopping in midair and displaying a lot of the typical physical characteristics of propulsion and navigation that are included in many reports today. So let's fast forward into the 20th century. During World War II, especially on August the 5th, 1944, Sir Winston Churchill made a conference and pronounced that he is banning, at that time, all UFO reports released until the years roughly about 2010. That was again dictated by the British government. So that announcement pretty much sealed the fate on total transparent disclosure for at least a few decades anyways. Fast forward a little bit, going into 1952, very worldwide seminal case. From September the 14th roughly to the 30th, this was part of Operation Mainbrace, and that involved over 85,000 military and non-commissioned personnel and the general public that witnessed many UAP sightings, landings, buzz-bys, over the UK, the North Sea area where the NATO war games were being conducted, Belgium, Netherlands, Germany, and even parts of northern France. Amongst the dignitaries, then private citizen but future President Dwight Eisenhower was actually a witness to some of these events, which were witnessed by over 85,000 people. Fast forward a little bit, on October 25th, 1967, Sussex County had a flap called the Sussex Flying Cross, which involved members of the Sussex Police Department. I heard the entire department was actually chasing these unidentified aerial phenomenon that were shaped and reported to be like flying crosses. In 1974, November 23rd to be exact, was the event called then and today the Welsh Roswell, in which many citizens and public officials reported lights and ground tremors, aka earthquakes, in the particular area, and also during the flap reports of a crashed unidentified object that actually hit Earth and was then covered up by British military authorities, the military-industrial complex, as you will, in regards to the total disappearance of any of the evidence related to this. But then in 1980, in December, from the 25th to the 29th, the world-famous Rendlesham Woodbridge incident, in which UAPs were recorded, documented, and scientifically studied and evidence collected by both U.S. Air Force and Royal Air Force personnel for those 4 days and nights, in which unidentified craft landed. Much evidence was collected, and testimony, which was recorded both on audio and video, from various U.S. military officers, including Colonel Charles Halt, Deputy Base Commander. The Rendlesham Woodbridge incident. Woodbridge, incidentally, it was a military base back then. It was nuclear base. It was suspected to have housed many nuclear-tipped warheads, which may lead to part of the interest for the UAP and the incident to actually have happened. So then in June of 2008, there was another flap, again in Wales, in the Cardiff, Brewis, and Bury regions and town locations. So this flap lasted for roughly about 6 weeks or so. Excuse me. Again, if you want to do your own studying, there's many more cases in the British history files for this. So I'll move on now to the contributors. And again, this list is long, extensive, and many, but I'll give you some of the significant ones. In the current age of UFO, ETI, UAP study and phenomenon, Sir Henry Tizard stands out as one of the pioneers, British pioneers. He founded the Flying Saucer Workers' Party in 1950, and from that spawned magazines, steady reports, newsletters, many clubs, groups, and organizations that were developed, and I'm going to touch on those in just a second here. The British, another main contributor, the British UFO Research Organization, acronym BUFORA, B-U-F-O-R-A, was formed in 1962, and again, following the evolution, they produced, are producing newsletters, magazines, and whatnot. The original BUFORA spawned the British UFO Organization, which does still exist today. Its current director and present president is longtime contributor and ufologist Philip Mantle. The British UFO Organization does study over 400 cases each year. Cases, there's more that come in there, but they actually study more than 400 of them. And it's not only covering the UAP phenomenon, but crop circles and other paranormal activity. Remember, we've got a very rich region in Wiltshire and Stonehenge areas that goes back many, many millennia, in fact. So the British Flying Saucer Bureau was another extension of the before conglomerate, so to speak, where they do a direct investigation group, and again, which still exists, plus many smaller organization offshoots from the before us. So let me just read to you here the list of UFO organizations that have existed, the significant ones, and a lot of these still do exist. Among them, the Anomaly Researchers UK, the British Earth and Aerial Mystery Society, or BEAMS, Birmingham UFO Group, and its offshoot Birmingham UFO Group Contactee Abductee Support Group, the Bolton UFO Society, or BUFOS, the British UFO Research Association, again, before, and all of its offshoots, the Contact International UFO Research, the Cornwall UFO Research Group, Exopolitics UK, London UFO Studies, or LUFOS, Luofin, the Leicestershire Unidentified Flying Object Investigation Network, Nottingham Skywatch, Plymouth UFO Research Group, Southend UFO Group, Strange Phenomenon Investigations, Wakefield UFO Research and Investigation Group, and the Welsh UFO Research Network, or WUFORN, just amongst some of the other very significant contributors. Now, as far as before I go to the a few individuals, the Flying Saucer Review was a very famous publisher of periodicals, newsletters, and magazines. Their run was published from 1955 and ended in 2001. But again, the archive history of its entire published database still exists and is readily available today. Again, the Bufora UFO Times was another magazine, and a couple of main personal contributors. Nick Pope, who was worked at the Ministry of Defense office in the 1980s, 1990s, and early 2000s. David Clark, who was a journalist but was very influential in not only publishing articles, doing research, investigating, and books, but was also a very important figure in the UK Freedom of Information Act evolution and eventual litigation for obtaining many documents that were being held under secrecy by the government. And one other publication, the UFO, which currently exists, the UFO Truth e-zine magazine, which is published by Gary Hesseltine. You've heard me talk about him quite extensively. He's one of the founders and continuing director and member of the International Coalition for Extraterrestrial Research. That's the worldwide organization that is working with the United Nations in order to have them reopen their UFO offices and to then be able to create an ongoing worldwide organization where the ufology community can come, share information, create new research, do new research, create new discoveries, and meet on a continuing basis each year. So Gary Hesseltine, it's the UFO Truth e-zine. I'm currently a subscriber to it. I strongly encourage you. It's very inexpensive to be a member, but it's a very well thought out written e-zine, electronic digital format. So, and then again too, the MUFON organization, Mutual UFO Network, you've heard me talk about them extensively. They have a very active chapter in the UK. Mike Price is currently the director, international UK director, and I will show you his email address up here, and as I go through next in the particular significant websites, I'll show you these addresses here, but also too, you can, I refer you to my Facebook page, The Humaniverse, for, again, publishing and displaying those website links for you with which to be able to continue on doing your own research. So Mike Price, as is listed here, his email address, the MUFON Director of the UK. Now, other websites that have been involved in this effort here, they include the National Archives.uk. They were the seminal deposit and repository and the most important single significant effort in disclosing and being transparent and disclosing the vast archives of UFO files and case studies that exist nowadays. So again, I mentioned Nick Pope is a very important contributor. He does have his own website too, as I am listing here for you, and he's got much information on his history at the Ministry of Defense, and he's continued his ufology career since he retired. Oh my gosh, this has been over 15 years ago now, as a continuing worldwide ufologist member. So also too, the befora.org.uk website has been and continues to be very seminal. The MUFON.com organization, Mutual UFO Network, and WorldCat.org. Now, WorldCat is an academic research and website portal, which has also contains a very, very large database of UFO, UAP, and ET files here. So as I continue on here, I jump into the list of agencies. It's an extensive list that has and is currently existing and is part of the British government network and efforts. The best way to summarize this is to say that the British military industrial complex is very extrinsically involved and represents one of the more involved extensive webs of any individual government, nation's government, of any of the 16 countries that I have done in my series here. So amongst these various agencies, the Joint Defense Intelligence Agency, the Scientific Intelligence Director, the Joint Technical Intelligence Committee, the Public Records Office, or PRO, Secretary of Defense, the Ministry of Defense, Royal Air Force and Navy, the Meteorological Office, and the Cabinet Office. So actually also too, Bletchley Park, which has been, as you know from many of the archives, a very popular source of story content and whatnot. So I'm going to move into the disclosure area now. As I mentioned at the beginning, in the 1970s, the Ministry of Defense actually did destroy many of the files due to their excuse and reason that there was a lack of public interest. Whether these records were destroyed forever or what the future holds in terms of maybe the discovery of some of these new documents, remains to be seen, I guess, is anybody's guess. But with the extensive ufology community research and investigation team out there, I'm sure more of these will be uncovered in the near future. So this was also reported by Nick Pope in various articles and reports about these files being destroyed. So as I mentioned, in October 1950, Henry Tizard created the Flying Saucer Working Party, or the Working Party on Flying Saucers, actually. It was reported actually right around that time. Sir Winston Churchill had made public announcements back then too, that their determination from an official government source that they, meaning UFOs, UAPs, exist, are indisputable, but no threat to security. And that seems to mirror the reports and publicity from many of the nations back then, especially the important ones, the US, Russia, Australia, amongst others, that reported that, well, because there was no national threat, these things are not to be studied, or they just don't exist at all. So we've had 70 some years of evolution to enjoy since then. So our landscape and our civilization's views have been modified, evolved, and enriched quite a bit here. So in 1986, the Ministry of Defense released to the PRO, the Public Records Office, many articles in regards to disclosure and whatnot. I'm going to highlight a few of those here for you right now. In 1993, actually for a period of years in the late 1990s and early 2000s, Air Staff and Defense Intelligence DI-55 UFO files were available at the Public Records Office. This was after a 30-year rule that was created, a law under the Public Records Act. And this goes back to Winston Churchill's efforts towards the end of World War II and into the early 1950s for legally sealing all UFO UAP records. And he used and discussed this 30-year rule, with which only after that point would these files be at all possibly available to be released. So they kind of put a clamp on the disclosure effort way back then, and basically for most of the rest of the 20th century. But also, too, they kind of played their hand a little bit in promoting that, well, this phenomenon actually does exist. It can't be debunked. It can't be denied. These things do exist. So, again, for some people out there that continue to debunk, deny, and just shake their head no at the whole thing, well, these things are, with the government disclosures and through the efforts of my video series here, it's kind of showing our civilization that we are probably already past the point of disclosure. It's just now getting the rest of the disclosure happen and following through with first contact and enduring global acknowledgement relationships and whatnot. But continuing on with the disclosure efforts of the UK, in 1998, some UFO sighting reports were released to under the Freedom of Information Acts, and Code of Practices were disseminated into the general public. This started the FOIA Information Act and activity that continues on through to this day. Now, in 1999 through 2005, various MOD and Air Ministry UFO files were released. David Clark, as I mentioned before, a very important individual contributor to the ufology effort and very instrumental in Freedom of Information Act activities. The various files were released to him and others under the Code of Practice request. So, further on in the disclosure effort, as an intermission away from the MOD activities and various British governments, private citizen in 2001 and 2 by the name of Gary McKinnon, he gained worldwide fame by hacking into the United States National Air, the NASA agency, aerospace space agency. He hacked into their network and exposed many files and reports of covert secret USA and joint US-UK worldwide government activities in relation to the UFO UAP phenomena. He was ultimately caught and arrested by the United States Federal Bureau of Investigation, and he did pay very, very dearly for his acts. But he did bring to the public spotlight a very important aspect in that, yes, there were secret covert UAP UFO activities, and yes, the U.S., and it seemed to be a worldwide effort, many countries involved with this. So then forward after Gary McKinnon's individual effort in 2005 and 2006, the Ministry of Defense made available their beginnings of their annual UFO sighting summaries online. They started digitizing their efforts of disclosure, transparency, and case file dissemination and whatnot. In 2006, the famous Project Condign report was released by David Clark and others by Freedom of Information Act request. So Project Condign was very important and akin to the United States Project Blue Book activities, in which there were published books and reviews and conclusions about the particular studies in hand. So then in 2008, and this continues to date, full UFO archives were to be placed online from the Ministry of Defense. And with the cooperation of the newly created National Archives of the UK. And this is an ongoing process in which the National Archives were to finish by 2012, with David Clark serving as a consultant. Up to the year 2007, there were 205 files in the MOD archives, covering both briefing papers and actual UFO reports. Well, that 205 has exploded into tens and hundreds of thousands. So the Ministry of Defense then continued in its effort. By 2012, they released what are called tranches of materials. There was 10 of them in all. May 2008, this was the first tranche that it was actually published. 8 files online, 1,500 documents covering the 1980s. In October 2008, 19 more files and 4,500 pages. The third tranche, March of 2009, 7 files, 2,000 pages. In August of 2009, the fourth tranche, 14 online files, 4,000 pages, 800 plus sighting reports. The fifth tranche, February of 2010, 24 files, 6,000 pages, more than that. August of 2010, they were doing this every 6 months or so. 18 files online, 5,000 pages. March of 2011, 35 files, 8,500 pages. August of 2011, 34 more files, 8,600 more pages. That was the 8th tranche. The 9th and 10th continued on in 2012 to where 46 more files, actually 250 to 300 more files were made available to the public. And then right after the 10th tranche in 2012, 12,000 more UFO cases were reported to the Ministry of Defense throughout its history. So again, the UK has become very transparent, and as I mentioned at the very beginning of my discussion here, it took them a while to do it, but they eventually came around. So I'll just highlight the National Archives to date. It's in its current format. They cover 5 particular areas of the UFO UAP phenomenon. They cover documents and files reports relating to UFO policy. Secondly, those cases and studies of parliamentary interest. The British Parliament was again very active, and they still have to work with freedom of information requests and things like that. Third area is public correspondence. Again, as I mentioned, very rich, very substantive, and continuing ongoing. Sighting reports, again, are continuing very active to be reported, studied, investigated by numerous organizations, both public and some quasi-government throughout the UK network. And then miscellaneous periphery, which may have to do with potentially some studies and things of what will be going on in the future. And as one of the main areas of my research and involvement in this ufology community, as my advocacy towards moving towards not only first contact but enduring global acknowledgement, EGA, enduring global relationships with those extraterrestrial intelligences. So in conclusion, the UK government web is as extensive as the US, the USSR, and any other countries that I have covered in my lecture series here. The UK will be a major player in the future when we get past the bulk of first contact and into enduring global EGAs and EGRs. And again, as I mentioned before, more files are waiting to be disseminated into the public. They do exist and will be made available as time goes on. So with all this bevy of information I've given you about the United Kingdom, I sign off and send you off onto your own studies right now. Please take a look at all my other videos in this series. I cover 16 different countries and representing over half of the world population, all available on my YouTube channel, Keith Seelan, the Humaniverse. So I bid you farewell, and thanks for tuning in, and I will talk to you again with another installment real soon. Take care. Have a good day.